Welcome to the Simple Questions podcast. This is your host, Dylan Carnahan. The question for this episode is nothing. This episode is a compilation of the best moments from the last 13 episodes. You will hear intriguing clips from episode 40 through episode 50, which includes conversations with a world-class expert in behavioral economics, an exoneree, a UFC fighter, a voice actor, a homicide detective, and many more. Let's begin with our guest, Samantha Brant, a mother and advocate whose child, Macy, was diagnosed with Rett Syndrome. It's a rare disorder that steals communication and movement, but not awareness. In this part of the conversation, Sam explains what that journey really looks like from a parent's eyes.
You know, your child is born happy, healthy, normal. Usually at birth, you know nothing is wrong. That's the really hard part about Rett syndrome. Your child starts to develop. They coo and smile and roll and crawl and walk and talk, just like any other kiddo. And then all of a sudden, usually about 6 to 18 months, but there's a little bit of a span, they start to lose those skills. So your child that may have walked loses the ability to walk. Your child that may have had words loses those words. It's called regression, and they regress in skills. And it is, for a parent, it is like having a rug pulled out from underneath your feet and you just smack the ground because you can't, this is happening in front of you and you don't understand why, right? They may go through a time that they really like pull their hair or grind their teeth. They begin to lose hand use. So for example, Macy went from feeding herself and picking up Cheerios and blueberries and kiwi and all these things that she loved to eat to, I can distinctly remember putting mandarin oranges on her tray, turning around to do dishes, turning back around, and she's just staring at them because her hand stereotypies started to where all she would do was be able to clap or put her hands in her mouth. She wasn't able to use her hands any longer to feed herself. That is devastating as a parent to watch. So I'd say, you know, grinding their teeth, the losing of skills are really, really big indicators that something is off, something is wrong.
After hearing Samantha Brant describe the daily fight to give her daughter a voice, the idea of access takes on a new meaning. It makes you ask, when we finally create something that helps, who actually owns it? Here's attorney Karin Coger.
So for business owners, again, at the very beginning stages of your business, when you're forming it, when you're coming up with your name, not only do you do a business search, so search your state's commerce office. They have the listing of all the business names that have been registered, search GoDaddy, do your Google search, but also invest those funds into speaking to an intellectual property attorney such as me, and even doing the first phase of registration, which is the search. The search is the most important part. So, before you fall in love with that brand name that you created, and a lot of times, again, people don't necessarily infringe, purposely. You might have seen something that inspired you and you created something you think it's your own original creation, only to find out somebody else has already registered it. So invest that money up front, because that is the main thing that people say, like, oh, I feel like it's cost prohibitive to, invest in trademark registration or even the trademark search, but it's more costly, to invest all that money in your business only to find out that it's really not viable.
Karin's view of ownership comes down to structure and respect. The same structure drives the martial arts discipline. Jinsue Park, a lifelong Taekwondo competitor and coach, explains how it shapes character.
So let me break it down into different types of people. Okay, for the most part, if you ask any child, do you want to learn? martial art or Taekwondo, they all say, yeah, I'm super psyched. Yeah. But then they don't realize the level of work because most kids today aren't that flexible. It's funny. I think post-COVID, kids have gotten even less flexible. They're not doing PE every week or every day like we used to. So that's way different. So for a child, I think it's for them to want to learn something new, maybe branch out and give them an opportunity to learn something. But I think for the parents, they're looking for the child to be in an activity that they'll be accepted and have fun. Because, you know, when you're playing a team sport, as you get older and you grow, I think we forget there are kids that want to compete. There are ones that just want to play the sport and not compete. And if you start to kind of are not at that level to keep moving forward in, say, travel, baseball, or soccer, then you kind of get left behind and you're like, okay, well, what do I do now? I still want to exercise of some sort. So for kids, I think it's a lot of parents understanding what the kids want to do and how they want to do it, but also support them. You know, if they want to quit right away, might want to talk with them about it and say, well, why is that? Like, it's going to be a little difficult. We knew that, but let me help understand why you want to maybe quit. Adults tend to be way different. So adult men, they want to go in and they want to learn so that they can get back to the shape that they were in high school or college. That's what I hear a lot. They're like, well, I just need to get back in shape. I need to get out of my family mode or work mode, and I just need to get better at being me so that I can be better for my family or better for work, which is a very common thing, what I see. And they tend to keep moving forward, and because I don't think a lot of men want to give up real easily, because once they start something in martial arts, they're like, you know what, this is fun. I am learning. I don't mind moving forward. A lot of times it's work pressure or family pressure that maybe takes them out. What I've noticed is there are a lot more women who are wanting to learn martial art now because it's maybe through their children, because their kids are in class and they're like, well, if I'm going to have to stay and wait, I might as well join. Or, you know, they're like, I wouldn't mind, because the bar class that a lot of these women are taking these days, you know, martial arts has a lot of bar activity where you're having to kick, not just a couple times, hundreds of times. And if they're trying to be flexible and be more limber and also be better at their hip movement, then they want to do Taekwondo. And that helps them to be in class with their kids. So they're able to do an activity with their child, which most parents can't just go out on the basketball court with their child on a team. So I think that's a great thing. For many people, I just think they're wanting to do an activity that allows them to move at their own speed. And I think for any martial art, you control how fast you want to go or how slow you want to go. But again, communicate that to the instructor so that they know.
Jinsue's lessons about control take on a heavier weight when control is stripped away. Marvin Cotton Jr., who spent nearly 20 years wrongfully imprisoned, shows what discipline looks like when your freedom is gone.
When it worked out, and that was like a part of my everyday routine, it kind of keeps stress off of you, kind of keep you in shape, keeps you battle ready, because you are in a type of environment where you have to be battle ready. So I used to work out every day, and I used to have these really good workouts, not so much anymore. And I was coming off of the prison yard, and something told me to call home. And usually at that time, I wouldn't call home because I would rush back and get in the shower before they locked the prison down, because I didn't want to sit in the cell without getting in the shower after that workout. But for some reason, I stopped and I got the phone, called my mother. And when I got on the phone, my mother was like, "It's over." I was like, "What you mean it's over?" And she said, "It's over. The case, it's over. You know, your lawyer called me and said it's over." So I'm like, hold up. You know, my mother, she's such an optimist that maybe she got a bit of information and she's running with it. and it may not be exactly what she's saying. So I got off the phone with her and I called my daughter. Now, my daughter's the complete opposite. She's not a pessimist, but she's going to tell you exactly how it is. She's not going to add anything. She's not going to take anything away. If she says it, you can put all your money on it. So I called my daughter and I said, have you talked to my lawyer? And my daughter was like, well, you're not even supposed to know. Like, how do you even know? Like, you ain't supposed to know. So I'm like, you talked to my lawyer? And she was like, yeah. I said, like, what's up? So my daughter actually confirmed it. So when my daughter confirmed it, I knew that that's what it was. And the next day, I talked to my attorney. My attorney called up to the prison. I talked to my attorney, and that made it even realer. And then I went to court 2 days later via Zoom. And you can find a hearing online. It's a YouTube video floating around. I'm sure you can find it by Googling my name. And the same day, I walked out the door. Same day I went to court, I walked out the door, and it was really surreal. And I've been home now 3 years and like 7-8 months, and I still have surreal moments.
After surviving injustice, Marvin talks about rebuilding a life. That hunger, literal or symbolic, drives people like world champion eater George Chiger, who turned routine into mastery.
Hot dogs come in packs of 8, buns come in packs of 10, and it's a confusing option on what I need to do, but I know I can eat more than 8 hot dogs. So I'm like, okay, I bought 2 packs of dogs and 2 packs of buns, and we go to the gym and I crush them. I eat 16 dogs and buns in 10 minutes, and she's like, oh, you're good, you should train for this. And I'm like, lady, you're crazy. Like, I'm just here to check this out. And I became her sparring partner. So like, hot dog season runs from the first week of April to the last week of June, or the first week of July, right? We take it right up to the 4th of July. And I just every week get together, we set up dogs and buns, and I'm training her for about 5 years. And she's like, you're good, you should really try to push yourself, because she's like, this isn't fair, because if you could eat more than me. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, but what because I've always ate like 16, but she's eating 15. And she's like, well, what happens if I eat 16? I'm like, I'll just eat 17, And she's like, oh, I hate you. And I'm like, well, I'm just here to push you. And but when she finally talked me into trying to qualify, I started signing up for the qualifiers. And my very first qualifier, I came in like 2nd place with 17 hot dogs and buns. And I walk off, George Shea's like the MC, and I got hooked right from the get-go.
Competitive drive connects every discipline. For George, it's eating endurance. For Angela Overkill Hill, it's combat. The question becomes, how do you stay centered when the fight never ends?
Exactly. You got to trust the process and enjoy the process. And if you don't, then like you picked the wrong profession, because there's a lot of easier ways to make money. Like that's that's a quote my husband used recently. But there's a lot of easier ways to make money, especially in the beginning. There's so many easier ways to make the money that you would make on the regional scene. And same with like, once you get to the big show, if you can't do the work to perform, then you're going to be in and out so fast if you make it that far. So it's a grind, and it's a lifetime grind until you're out of there, till you're done. And then after that, you got to figure out what else to do with your life, because you've been spending so much of your time focusing on fighting. So I guess another thing I would say is always have that backup plan ready, and not even a backup plan, but just after plan, and have it be something that you can start wherever you're at in your career, and that'll help you get transition to that next stage and not stick around too long, because we see that a lot with MMA fighters. Like, you stick around too long because that's the only thing you know how to do is fight.
Angela faces pressure in the octagon. Dr. Tahir Rahman studies what happens when mental pressure breaks, how conviction twists into destruction.
We know from data that around 81% of attackers, terrorists, school shooters, assassins, lone actor attackers will have a fixation. And usually that fixation is ideologically driven. So examples could include white supremacists, neo-Nazis, radical jihadists, even school shooters will develop an ideological framework. And so we call that frame by an ideology in threat assessment lexicon.
Dr. Rahman dissects how ideas spread in minds. Nick Hunn built how signals spread in machines. Both chase connection, one psychological, one technological.
And in Bluetooth, we have a particular approach to licensing that everybody gives in their IP, and that goes into the standard. And nobody gets paid a fee for that. We work on the sort of the greater good that if it works, the market grows. And today there's something like 3 billion Bluetooth chips sold every year. So it's worked quite well for this industry. And the really good thing about that is you don't get much politics in these meetings. You just get a group of engineers who are trying to produce the very best technical solution they can think of. That itself has its issues because all of them often think they've got a better way of doing it than anyone else. Sometimes even two engineers from the same company will sit there arguing as to which is the best way to do it. But it's quite a good and really inspiring situation to be in, of having these bright people sort of arguing the toss of what works best and should we do this, and also thinking about how do you make it cost effective, because we could design something that was really difficult and really expensive. And part of Bluetooth has always been going back to say, well, is it good enough for purpose? And if it is, don't make it more complex just for the sake of showing off.
From invisible signals to invisible patterns, Tommy Cherry, world record Speedcuber, lives inside algorithms, turns, memory, and motion.
Yeah, and then once I got my cube, I remember the first thing I did was I was trying to just do some kind of sequence of moves over and over again in hopes that it would solve. And at the time I didn't realize that this sequence of moves would take a lot of iterations for the cube to actually return to its original state. So at some point I just got bored and started doing random turns on the cube, but by then the cube was just scrambled in a way where I didn't know how to restore it back. Something not everybody may know is that for any sequence of moves you can do on a Rubik's Cube, if you repeat it enough times, the cube will go back to its original state. So this kind of leads to a common misconception, though, where it's oh, well, then by repeating any combination of moves, you can solve any state of the cube. But this only actually applies when the cube is solved and you're trying to return it to its original state, or if the cube is scrambled up, then doing this will only just bring it back to that same scrambled state. It won't just, magically solve it. I've seen a lot of clickbaity tutorials on YouTube where it's solve the Rubik's Cube in 2 simple moves, and unfortunately it doesn't work quite like that. I guess it is a fortunate thing, though, because then it leads to complexity that leads to this whole interesting world of...
Pattern recognition can save seconds or lives. Detective Dave Walker breaks down how patterns expose truth in homicide cases.
That's where my thinking started, to solve stuff, and not just solve the stuff in front of me. It was to prevent the next crime. So if we can get these kids not to commit burglars or burglary and steal your stuff, then we get there. And I'm saying kids because adults are burglars too, and they're just kind of lost, and that's why we warehouse them. But so, man, lo and behold, 3 years in burglary, I went to robbery. Now that started violent crime. And what I like to say about the burglars is that we chase them around a lot. And those are a lot of fun because they probably won't kill you. They're just thieves and you're kids and you're jumping fences and you're tackling them and you do all that stuff that they see in the movies, but you don't see it out there because they're not there. But robbery, when you start chasing robbers, they may kill you. So you have to be a little more careful, a little more cautious when you're chasing them around. And then when I went to the homicide unit in 2011,
Sergeant Walker hunts voices of guilt. Billy West becomes voices of imagination. From evidence to emotion, here's how one man gave sound to generations.
And I auditioned for that. And it was my audition tape that sold the show. I did both voices. And the guy who created the show decided he was going to do the Ren voice. And I didn't give a fat frog's ass who did what, because I had a job. You know, I said, Jesus, I'm going to be doing cartoons. What, I mean, you know, it's kind of everything I wanted to do. And so I did it for, we were into it for about a year and a half. And he got himself fired from his own show. You know, he was kind of a loose cannon, and so they came back to me and they said, "Hey, weren't you supposed to do both voices originally?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember auditioning." And they said, "We want you to do both." And so then it was, you know, happy, joy. Hey, Ren, will you button me? Will you shut up, you fool? And I can kill you. And you know, that lasted, excuse me, for about 4 seasons. And so did Doug. And then Disney bought the rights to Doug. And they, you know, they came to me and they said, "We want you to do it." And they wanted to give me less money for more work. They wanted me to do more for less money. And I said, "I wish you the best, you know." And Ren and Stimpy, just very recently, about a year and a half ago, I got involved with recording some new stuff, but I don't know if it's going to come out or if they shelved it or whatever. But I was screaming and yelling like 31, 32 years ago. I said, "You better keep a paramedic in the lobby," you know, because I was a young guy when I did that show.
Billy shows how tone can change perception. Dan Ariely explains how bias changes decisions and why we rarely notice.
Every time we come to a decision, it's very hard to think about the decision thoughtfully from scratch. So habits are basically a way to make lots of decisions in a good way. It's basically saying, if I rely on myself to make the right decision every time, I might not. So let me create a personal rule or a habit or something like that. So once a year, try to audit your decisions, say, where are the decisions where I feel I'm not maximizing? And let me see if I can create a rule or a habit or something that would solve it. So imagine we have small decisions and big decisions. Big decisions are big. We spend time and so on, and there are ways to make better decisions. Small decisions, you know, we're not going to think very carefully about every time we buy coffee, whether we buy the small, medium, with a muffin or without a muffin. But repeated decisions are small decisions at a time, but together they add up. So we need to think about them as a separate category and say, can we create some general mechanism that would carry us through and make us more likely to make the right decision every time? So, and that's one that I think is really worthwhile focusing on.
Ariely reminds us that better design can shape behavior. Shane Remington took that literally, building Peppermint OS so anyone, anywhere could use technology without fear.
So he and I sat down, honestly, with pencil and paper and kind of, you know, just whiteboarded out on drawing paper at the bar. This is how it should look. This should be here. This should be here. This is the color scheme. This is what we're going to do. These are the software packages we want to make sure that are available when it comes open out of the box. And let's think about it from like the normal user. Like, what would I give my mom? What would I give my kids? And Kendall's like, that's a really good point. And I was like, I said, let's do this. Let's get Peppermint like up and running to where it's ready for release, to where it's ready to go. And before we release it, let's let my kids look at it. And let's let your sister look at it. And let's just put it in front of them. Don't even tell them what it is, just boot it up and just say, hey, can you do these things on this machine? And, you know, my 2 kids, we had a computer lab in our house. We had like 2 or 3 machines there, and they could, even like half dead ones, they could take apart and put back together again. And so we put it on a couple machines and we're like, here you go. And they're like, okay. and they're like bam, they're like without even asking, they like knew where the web browser was, and they were off on their way. Like, oh, here are the games. And they started playing the games, and it was like, okay, we got it. You know, if my kids can pick it up, if your sister can pick it up, if your mom can open it up and start doing her day-to-day activities, you know, that's a home run. Especially, you know, when you know, we're coming into a time at that point, because this was quite a few years ago, everything was, you know, web-based, web 2.0 or whatever. And so most things were web-based, and, you know, even on your, you know, your phone, everything was powered by the web. So if you had that experience wrapped up, 95% of everybody that's going to use it, that's what they're going to use it for anyway. And it's the other tertiary tools that they pick up later.
That wraps up 13 months of highlights. We appreciate each of our listeners, guests, and supporters who've been with us on this incredible journey. Any highlight that caught your ear can be listened to by visiting the full episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the Simple Questions podcast to get notified when our future episodes are released. Thank you for listening, and remember to keep asking questions.